about America's, Washington's dysfunction, the fact that you can't have any, bipartisan agreement on anything, well, does anybody even go back to September? And we had bipartisan agreement. The vote was something like 78-20-something on arming Syrian rebels in the Senate. That was bipartisan. So the idea that the Washington dysfunction means that nothing is going to happen, I think you're likely to see far more action, far more progress take place in foreign policy than you are in domestic policy.
So does it actually mean everyone agrees, or it's too much of a what do you call it, a hot potato for Congress to try to insert itself and rather just leave something to the president?
It means that the next 2 years are going to be focused very, very large part on 2016. You should now consider that we have started the run-up to the general election in 2016. That gun has just gone off. And what that means is most political, you know this better than anybody, most political operatives in the U.S. will say a presidential election is all about domestic policy, and specifically it's all about the economy. So actually, foreign policy isn't nearly as partisan, which isn't to say it's not partisan, it's just to say it's not. So you can actually see things happen in foreign policy when you're not seeing any progress take place in domestic policy. And I think that's why typically the last 2 years of a presidency is largely foreign policy. If you go back and look at American presidents, the last 2 years of their policy, when they are considered to be a lame duck, is a foreign policy 2 years rather than domestic policy, because they can get stuff done.
Norbert, do you agree?
Yes, no, I disagree, because in current times there are very, very partisan views on foreign policy. There is a general assessment that the GOP will do better in the field of foreign policy, but the Democrats very much approve of staying aside, not getting a tougher stance towards Russia, towards Iran, and so on. So we have very partisan views and attitudes towards foreign policy. So this will mean that the debate in the Senate and the House will increase, and it will be very much contested. But at the end of the day, due to the constitutional prerogative and due to the different partisan views and attitudes, Obama will not change his course. But this, I agree with this, does not mean that there will nothing happen. He is determined to strike an Iran deal. This is a very, very important, and if he achieves a viable deal, I am convinced he will present this deal to Congress and challenge them to pass or to reject it, and to take the burden of responsibility to reject it. And this would mean not to take the opportunity to strengthen the moderate forces in Iran, and this has a strategic impact on the whole region. So he will drive this course.
But especially on foreign policy, often the divide is not a partisan divide. When you look at something like NSA surveillance, you have Rand Paul teaming up with liberal Democrats to oppose eavesdropping.
Name it. Boots on the ground. There is a majority of Republican voters for boots on the ground in the MENA region.
And there's a decent, significant group of Democrats who also believe boots on the ground isn't a bad idea.
Among the voters, it's one-third.
Republican Democrats.
Yes, but among the voters, one-third are arguing for boots on the ground, two-thirds against it, and the majority of the Republican voters are for boots on the ground in this region.
I'm not sure that he's going to take the Iran deal to Congress. He has the right to waive sanctions. That for a period, yeah. But he will start with that. He will not take it to Congress because he's afraid that they might say no. It's going to be a huge partisan fight over the Iran deal. And the question is, the Senate, the Republican-dominated Senate, they have the right of the purse, the power of the purse. So over the money, the appropriation bills, they can influence all those foreign policies. Whenever Obama needs to go, or the Democrats need to go and ask for money, whether it's Afghanistan, or it's Iraq, or it's Syria, then the Congress, the Senate, has the power of the purse.
And they can permanently thwart the president. They will not gain a reputation to govern the rule of the country. Yeah, they have to weigh up, at least.
Sure.
I think it's important. It's an important point to note that foreign policy issues tend to be more harmful to presidents than helpful, unless you have
crafted a decisive victory in some kind of conflict overseas, it's usually downside risk that the president takes on, which is why he likes to take the issue to Congress, because otherwise the president just gets beat up constantly for either any misstep or even without a misstep, anything that just seems to be going wrong. The president gets negative ratings on that. So that's why you'll see the president has said already he's going to take the question of authorizing military action in Iraq and Syria. But I wanted to say I don't think you'll see American troops on the ground in either Iraq or Syria. I do not think the American public, either party, is prepared to accept that outcome.
Okay, so 2016, people have talked a little bit about Hillary and whether this creates space for Hillary or not, and in a way, Hillary is so talked about that I would rather talk about the Republicans, although talk about whatever you want. My question is, having covered Romney, who I think was a pretty much moderate Republican, a Massachusetts governor, who plausibly could have been elected on the national stage, was forced so far to the right in the Republican primary caucus process that by the time he had to face off against Obama, obviously he had other weaknesses as well, himself into an extreme conservative corner. Will Republicans be forced to do the same thing? And will this Republican Congress that is stepping in January help or ultimately succeed on the national
You would see a move to the right that's due to the primary rule. You would also see on the Democratic side, well, if Hillary is going to run, they're not going to, this time, they're not going to have a big of a primary. I think it's probably given that she will be nominated. But, and so you won't see this on the left. But it's actually part of the system. So they have to move to the right. And actually, Romney was more to the right when he was in 2008 and was more moderate in 2012.
I would say there will be a hot infighting within the Republican Party between the Tea Party affiliates who want to win the election, and they know they have to outreach to the mid of the political spectrum, to women, to young people, to Hispanics, and there will be a fight within the Republican Party. I do not know who will win, but the better argument is to want to win the election. So I think there is a change in comparison to the last 2 years.
Like the Republican candidates this time around are
personality.
But he's actually, in politics terms, he is actually very conservative. He can be a moderate, he gets a moderate.
ゴキブリ漫画。
In the Republican side.
Bush would be pretty good, but he has a very it's his mother. His mother said, we don't need another Bush. His mother
has been told, and basically,
you, and while one person is asking a question, just sort of subtly, quietly raise your hand, and another microphone will come to the next person, so we can just bounce from one to another. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a recent graduate from the Truro College Berlin, an American university in Berlin. I have a question. So how come do politicians so often forget to truly do a selfless act, like, for instance, all the money that is acquired throughout the year? Instead of trying to invest into publicity, advertisement, and so on to profile yourself or to get a lot of votes, why is that money not rather invested into public goods or new schools or things like that? I mean, wouldn't that energy, maybe it's a very naive question.
Glenn, do you want to answer that?
That is an excellent question. I was astounded during the depths of the economic recession that the American